Hey, Tim Frisch with A Frisch Perspective here, your Christian nerd bringing you analysis, reviews, and fun. In this video, I would like to look at the question, should we capitalize pronouns for deity in English Bible translations? When it comes to pronouns in the Bible, sometimes you will notice in certain Bibles that the pronouns for God are capitalized. So it might refer to God as He, and that word He might be capitalized, or it might refer to Jesus as Him, and that might be capitalized. In other Bible translations, it's not. And so that becomes a question. Is it a good thing? Is it not a good thing? Why do some do it and others don't? And some people love it, some people don't like it. So I just thought it would be neat to look at this a little bit today, give some thoughts on it, and then hear your opinions in the comments. So let me give you some examples of translations that do use capitalized pronouns. So some examples would be the New American Standard Bible and the New King James Version. Those two translations capitalize pronouns for deity. And also the Holman Christian Standard Bible capitalized pronouns for deity. But the update of that, the Christian Standard Bible, did not capitalize pronouns. So the Christian Standard Bible that you see today doesn't have capitalization, even though its predecessor did. So that's interesting. And then a lot of other translations don't, and I think it's the more standard practice to not capitalize pronouns for deity. So the English Standard Version, the New International Version, even the King James Version didn't capitalize pronouns for deity. So that's an interesting point. But some people really do like it. So let's look at the positive side here. I know there are those of you out there who love it. Maybe use the New King James Version or the New American Standard Bible, and you've gotten used to it and you really love it. And probably the main reason that it's used, why we capitalize them, is to show respect for God. It's a way of designating a distinction for honoring God. And when we talk about God, we want to reverence Him. And so using pronouns that are special have a way of showing that reverence. But also it's nice when you're reading the Bible. A lot of you have had this experience where that capitalized pronoun, it just makes it clear. You know who it's referring to. And so, for example, there are places in the New Testament where a pronoun is used in the original, but because it's capitalized, we know that that pronoun is referring to Jesus. Whereas if you don't have a capitalized pronoun and there's just a pronoun all of a sudden in the middle of a paragraph, sometimes it's hard to remember who is that referring to. Now, obviously, if the pronoun's at the beginning of a sentence, it's going to be capitalized anyway. But still, I think sometimes it just reminds us when we're reading along that, oh yeah, this is referring to God, this is referring to Jesus, and that just makes it a little easier. So I think those are the two big things in favor of capitalizing pronouns. It shows reverence and respect for God, but also it clarifies who is speaking in certain passages. And so I think the capitalized pronouns are a nice feature in some Bibles. On the other hand, there are people who don't like it or aren't as in favor of it. And so what are the things against capitalizing pronouns? Well, first of all, it's not standard English practice. Now, this is different from language to language. So interesting, depending on what language you speak and what language you're using, you might think capitalized pronouns is a normal thing or a good thing, or you may not. But typically in English, we don't capitalize pronouns. That's just not a standard practice. So to do it, to some grammarians, seems out of place. It just seems arbitrary. Now, it is a more recent practice, but it's been practiced for quite some time now. So I don't know that you can say it's totally out of the question whether you can do that with correct English, but I understand typically it's not what we do. So that's one point against it. But the other thing, and I think this is actually a more important thing for a lot of us, is the original languages didn't capitalize pronouns in the way that we do in the English translation. So that's an issue because now it becomes an issue of interpretation. If the original language didn't capitalize, then sometimes we're actually interpreting. We're saying, okay, we're going to capitalize this pronoun because we think it's referring to God, but in some cases, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And how do you be consistent, especially with messianic prophecies? I want to show you a comparison of two translations that actually do capitalize pronouns for a deity, but notice how they treated this passage in different ways. So we're looking at Psalm 22, and on the left we have the New King James Version. And it says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me?" Notice that the "me" in these two sentences is capitalized because it is a messianic psalm referring to Jesus on the cross. So that "me" there is referring to Jesus. But then when you look at the New American Standard Bible, it says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And notice, in this case, "me" is not capitalized. So as you can see in that passage, the New King James and the New American Standard Bible chose to deal with pronouns in a different way. That's a messianic psalm. Now let's look at another messianic prophecy, and this is Isaiah 53, and let's see how they handle this. So again, in the New King James Version on the left, it says, "Who has believed a report? To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He shall grow up before him as a tender plant, as a root out of a dry ground." In the New American Standard, it says in verse 2, "For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of a parched ground." And if you look at both of these passages referring to the Messiah, you can see that the pronouns are capitalized both in the New King James Version and in the New American Standard Bible. So in looking at how the New American Standard Bible deals with pronouns for deity in the Old Testament, you can see they made two different choices in Psalm 22 versus Isaiah 53. In one case, they didn't capitalize. In one case, they did. But in the New King James Version, they capitalize in both instances. And that's just one of the interpretive issues that you get when you're trying to capitalize pronouns for deity, is how often are you going to do that? Is this psalm or is this prophecy definitely talking about the Messiah, or is it also talking about someone else? And so as you can see, you have to make choices there, and that's interpretive. And just looking at how they dealt with these passages in different ways shows that interpretive element to capitalizing pronouns. Now, that's not an issue if you just say, we're not going to capitalize any pronouns. So then the person reading will interpret for themselves whether that's referring to God, and if that's a messianic psalm, and so on and so forth. But the point is, the original languages didn't capitalize them, so it's kind of actually better in some ways, as far as interpretation, not to capitalize them. That's something to think about. So all in all, where do I stand on this? I mean, it's really just a matter of opinion. I like that capitalized pronouns do show respect for God. That resonates with me, and I do like that. So I love the respect that it shows, and many times I've used capitalized pronouns when I'm writing and referring to God. I also like its clarity. Like I said, when you're reading different passages, it's often correct the way that they capitalize the pronoun, and so I think it's good. As long as you keep in mind that this is the translator's choice, and in a certain passage, if it's not totally clear, you want to keep that in mind. But often it just makes it so much simpler to say, yeah, this is referring to God, and the context makes that clear, and having the capitalized pronoun just clarifies that. But I will say, as I showed you here, that interpreting can be a problem. And as we looked at in that passage there, you know, if you're reading along, capitalized pronouns, they may be in some Bibles, maybe not in others. And so you realize, okay, there is an interpretive element here to capitalizing pronouns. So the real question is, what would the apostles do if they spoke English? Would they capitalize pronouns for deity? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm sure you have an answer to that question, and you can leave it in the comments below. But those are my thoughts on capitalizing pronouns for deity in English Bible translation. I would love to hear what you think. As always, thank you for listening to what I have to say from A Frisch Perspective.